Okay, so thank you very much for joining us today at the EdTech Lounge session. EdTech Lounge is a virtual community for practitioners in higher education to come together, share their practices of the use of technology in teaching and learning, and learn with each other about online and blended teaching and learning. Here are some tips for you to use Zoom during this talk. I would like to request everyone to keep their microphone on mute during the talk. And also keep your video switched off just to preserve bandwidth. If you have any questions during the talk, you can type it in the chat window, or at the end of the talk, you can raise your hand. Our speaker will speak for about 15 to 20 minutes, and after the talk, we will open up the session for question and answer and for discussion. Our today's speaker is Dr. Grace Edwards. Dr. Grace Edwards is Professor of Midwifery Education and Practice at the Aga Khan University School of Nursing and Midwifery, Uganda. In 1974, she commenced her nursing training and quickly realized that her heart lay in midwifery. She qualified as a midwife in 1978, working as a hospital midwife and a community midwife for 12 years, during which time she completed the Advanced Diploma of Midwifery and the Certificate in Education. She took up post as a midwife teacher in 1988 and completed a master's in education. In 1993, she was appointed regional coordinator for CESDI, the Confidential Inquiry into Stillbirths and Deaths in Infancy, a post that held until 2002. During this time, she completed a PhD on people's perceptions of healthy pregnancy. In 2002, she was employed as one of the first consultant midwives in the UK, specializing in public health in Liverpool, UK, working around all aspects of deprivation and inequalities that affect pregnant women and their families, and accepted a joint appointment as principal lecturer in midwifery research at the University of Central Lancashire, UK. In 2005, she was appointed as National Midwifery Assessor for the Confidential Inquiry into Maternal and Child Health for Maternal Mortality. She was recruited to work in the UAE in 2008, firstly as a midwifery research and development specialist at Al Wasl Hospital, now Latifa Hospital in Dubai, and in January 2011 as Assistant Director of Nursing and Midwifery with responsibility for leading the first 18-month midwifery education program and coordinating research trials at the Carnegie Hospital in Abu Dhabi. In 2016, she was appointed to her present post at the Aga Khan University as a professor, as a foundation professor of midwifery to lead on midwifery education and practice for AKU in East Africa. And in 2017, she was awarded an honorary post as professor of midwifery at Salford University, UK. She was also inducted as a fellow of the Royal College of Midwives and a senior fellow of Advanced HE, the Higher Education Academy in the UK. It is our pleasure to have you in the EdTech Lounge session today, Professor Grace Edwards, and I'm handing over the microphone to you, and you can now share your screen.
Thank you very much. So good morning, good evening, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for joining this session. I'm just going to share my screen. Oops. So as you heard from my biography, I'm an old dog. So the basis of my talk is about teaching old dogs new tricks. One of the things, it's an old proverb from the past that said that you could only teach puppies and young dogs how to do things. And as dogs got older, then they were unable to learn new tricks. And that's being transposed into people. And often you'll hear people say, oh no, I'm too old to learn that. I'm too old to change my ways. So what I wanted to do over the next 20 minutes is just give you some insight into how you can teach an old dog new tricks. So first of all, this was in 1973 when I was a teenager, and mobile phones were first introduced. So I can remember very clearly life before mobile phones. And what I'd like you to do is just put a little comment in the chat box or raise your hand if you can't remember life before a mobile phone. So the one on the right-hand side was actually one of the first mobile phones, and that big battery that goes beside it, you had to carry that around with you to be able to make a call. So when they say mobile, it was mobile as long as you were very strong. Okay, so just be interested to see how many people cannot remember life before a mobile phone. Okay, in 1981, I became a mother. And at the same time, Hewlett-Packard launched their first personal computer. And again, I'm wondering how many of you can remember life before we actually had PCs and laptops and access to internet. But 1981 was when the first one was launched, and you can see it was quite a big computer at the time. Okay, in 1991, my daughter was 10 years of age, and the World Wide Web was launched. And I remember very clearly at the time thinking, this will never take off. How can this possibly work? How wrong I was when it's become such a phenomenon now. So in 1998, when I wasn't a teenager, Google was launched. So again, it's relatively recently that we've had access to the digital technology that we can see today. So this would say I wasn't a teenager, I was a little bit older, but it was a real revelation to me that you could actually type something into this box and an answer would come up, and most times it was fairly accurate. Now, just to show that you can carry on learning, in 2020, when trying to master Google Docs for the first time, I was introduced to these little marks in the corner here, and it became a great revelation to me that there was actually something else in Google that you could access to access the internet. So just to give you some insight into life before in the old world. So in the past, my access to digital technology was I'm fairly computer literate on the computer as a PC user, but in terms of using the wider perspectives, I was just a Zoom person. I would wait for someone to send me the access to a Zoom link and be able to use Zoom for meetings. So really I was a very passive user. I didn't have to be a co-host or be able to do anything. I just followed the link and then if somebody else did it for me. So that was in the old world when I was really quite complacent about using Zoom just for meetings and for across the globe communication. Then of course in 2020 the world changed as we know it, and COVID has affected every aspect of our lives, not only in technology but in terms of our social world, and our friendships and our working lives have been completely changed. So then it became evident very quickly that we had to have a new normal. And the new normal is very much about digital technology, whether it's PCs, whether it's on your laptop, whether it's iPads or iPods, but that actually became very quickly the new normal that we had to become used to. Now I'll put this picture up because this is one of my favourite pictures. This was Edward Munch in 1883, and the picture is called The Scream, and you can see it in the in one of the Oslo art galleries in Norway. And it's become very poignant because people really relate to this in terms of mental health and in terms of helplessness and being out of control. So I just thought I'd show you that in 2020 it's been updated with my picture on, because that's one of the things I found is a real challenge. So in the past when we had Zoom meetings, of course, all we had to do was just link on the link and it was all very professional and we could talk to people in meetings. Now at the new normal, we have access to students, and it's very evident that we have a different standard that the students may use compared to what we're used to in the past. One of the other things I've noticed is that becoming teaching online, you become anchored to the computer. And we've gone from, so many 100 messages a day, and this one just about sums up my mailbox, 736 new messages, because people tend to communicate now much more by email and online than we did before. So we have a new world now, a new normal, and everything from churches to shopping to communicating with our families to leisure and of course to teaching has all become an online issue. So what I was very keen was that I didn't end up in the corner as the dunce, even though I was a little bit older, an older dog. So I wanted to make sure that I could keep up with the new technology and things that were happening, and there were some challenges. So some of the issues I had to be able to reach the goal of being able to teach distance learning, I'm going to discuss with you now. So this little cartoon shows you what the perfect online teacher has to be now. So we've moved very much away from face-to-face, which is where I'm most comfortable, and PowerPoint presentations and discussions, that now we have to be much more creative. We need to be able to access the web efficiently. We have to build a new paradigm because things are so different than the life we had beforehand. Everybody has to develop a new skill set for the 21st century. Some of us were a bit slower at moving than others, but we've all had to learn very quickly because this is the way forward. We've had to look at building a new learning environment that's interactive and flexible and that students feel comfortable with. And we also have to be very clear about our links to information management. Beforehand, we may send students to the library. Now we may not have that option. So we have to be able to access online information that's reputable and easily accessible for the students. So we have to become very, very flexible and innovative. So this picture sums up what our new life is like. So from face-to-face teaching, we're now teaching online almost exclusively. So here in Uganda, we have the graduating students back in campus, but all of the sessions now are online and digital learning. So it's very different from the life we knew at the beginning of the year. With the students, it gives you some different challenges in terms of being able to engage them. And I just like this cartoon, couldn't I do my detention online? Just because now the students are becoming much more used to using digital technology, they're looking at new ways of being creative as well. So what I found is that I had to learn a new language. So a year ago, Kahoot, Dropbox, blended learning, Mentimeter were all a foreign language to me. And I've had to learn very quickly thanks to BDL, the BDL network, who've been able to offer some fantastic courses. So now I know how to open waiting rooms and I know how to use Microsoft Teams, how to use Chatbox. So I've learned a completely different language. One of the advantages we've had in AKU is that we've always used Moodle as our learning platform. So that's been really useful, but we've had to move up a level now. So instead of using it just for communication with the students or for posting lectures or some assignments or sessions, we've now had to move it to a different level to make it much more interactive and much more available for students to use when they can't access real-time teaching online. So some of the challenges we've had, and I found this a big challenge, I'm very much a face-to-face person and I'm very tactile, so I found it quite isolating working online. And I know a lot of the students have found that as well, because as some of the speakers have mentioned recently, students don't know how to respond or whether they can respond appropriately, and they'll all respond or nobody will respond online. So I know a lot of students and faculty have found it quite isolating. It's also been quite difficult in engaging students online because students have different pressures, particularly the health students that we have in the School of Nursing and Midwifery, because they've been very much challenged to respond to the COVID crisis, and some of them have been unable to engage at the time we'd like them to. Another big issue that many of the speakers have mentioned recently is connectivity and bandwidth. We, as you know, give all our students a mobile data bundle to be able to access their classes online, but there's still lack of connectivity depending where they are in the country and in other countries. Some of them have gone back to the villages to work and they may have no contact at all, so it's been a big challenge. Also, all those students do access computers, and most of them have mobile phones who attend our university. A lot of them don't have smartphones, and they may not have computers in their workplace or at home. And some of their computer literacy has had to come up to speed very quickly. So as faculty, we've been blessed because we have more computer literacy, but some of the students have had to come up to speed very quickly, and they still have challenges. I was at a meeting yesterday when the students all had our orientation meeting. Even though they were asked to turn off their mics, they all had the microphones on, so we'd hear babies screaming and music and dancing and all sorts of frivolity that was detracting from other students who ended up getting quite cross. So until you learn those semantics of how to use it, it can be quite challenging. But some of the benefits we found, or I found personally, is that you can become much more student-centered. So if students can't access an online real-time session, you're able to talk to them offline or through Moodle and be able to address their worries or their concerns in an individual way. It also helps us be more flexible. So although we've got the course outline and the times that we offer our sessions, we can afford to be more flexible and adjust to what the students need. As we become more proficient, or as I've become more proficient with using digital learning, you can become more interactive. So we're miles away now from putting a PowerPoint presentation up and expecting the students to learn the information. It's much more interactive and much more able for the students to be able to comment in real time. One of the other benefits is that it reduces travel time and also our carbon footprint. Since being in lockdown in Uganda, which at first was very severe, we couldn't use cars for 2 months or drive at all, and there was no public transport. We noticed a big difference in the environment and in the air quality here, which has been a real positive. And instead of taking 2 hours to travel 5 kilometres to get to the university, we can be ready and start immediately online. And it also encourages the students to be self-motivating and increases their accountability. So they're no longer passive learners sitting in a classroom and just reading slides afterwards. They actually have to be accountable, they have to turn up, they have to contribute, and they have to be motivated to be able to do that. So there's been some real benefits in our new digital framework. So this just reminds me that we'll have different tales to tell our children and grandchildren as time goes on. So in the past, Granny might say I had to walk 2 miles through the snow to get to school. And our mothers may say my bus ride to school was 40 minutes before I got there. Now we'll be able to relate that it sometimes took us 30 seconds to log on to our online classes. So a very different landscape than before. So I just want to finish here and say one of the things that's been really useful for me as an older person is that there's a real emphasis on lifetime learning. And I've realized that that's important your whole life, that you never stop learning. Since I've been in Uganda for 4.5 years, I've learnt as much from the students here as they've learnt off me. So it's been really useful in terms of encouraging your brain, making sure you work and that you can always carry on learning. And I just wanted to finish with this quote from Michelangelo, which I thought was perfect. He said at the age of 87 that he was still learning. So finally, I think you can teach an old dog new tricks, and I've learned lots of tricks this year. So thank you very much for listening, and I'm open to any questions.